Whipped to bleeding for looking at her master's wife. A cowboy bound the wounds and gave her soft linen. The linen came from my own saddlebag. I want you to know that because some men have told the story different, that I went to the house, that I asked, that the Aldridge family gave it to me out of some kind of charity. They didn't. What I did with what I had on me. A clean shirt I'd been saving for Rosario. A canteen of water I'd filled that morning at the creek. Hands that had set fence posts and pulled calves and done nothing more remarkable in 42 years of living than whatever was in front of them. That's the whole story, if you want the short version. But you asked me why, and that takes longer. The Aldridge Ranch ran about 90,000 acres in the territory, back when the territory was still the territory, and the law was whatever Harlan Aldridge said it was on any given afternoon. He had a wife named Constance, fine-boned woman, northern-bred, with the particular kind of beauty that made men stupid and women cruel. And he had workers, some hired. Some not exactly hired, which in those years meant what it meant. And if you pressed Harlan Aldridge on it, he'd call them laborers under contract and pour you another glass of his bourbon and change the subject. I was hired. I want to be plain about that. I rode in the spring of '74 looking for seasonal work, and Aldridge's segundo offered me $40 a month and found, which was better than I'd done in Presidio the year before. I took it. I broke horses, I rode fence, I cut and branded. I slept in the bunkhouse with 11 other men and minded my own affairs. That was the plan, anyway. Her name was Lupe. She worked the house, or rather she worked everything the house required that Constance Aldridge considered beneath her. The laundry, the kitchen fires, the hauling of water, the scrubbing of floors on her hands and knees while Constance walked overhead in her good shoes. Lupe was maybe 25, maybe younger. She'd come up from below the river as a child with her father, who'd worked the Aldridge land and died on it, and she'd stayed because there was nowhere else and no money to get there. I didn't know her, not at first. You don't on a spread that size. The house people and the range people exist in different orbits. I saw her at a distance, carrying a yoke with 2 water buckets, hanging laundry in the wind, moving fast always, never standing still for more than a moment. She had a way of walking that I noticed before I knew I was noticing it, straight-backed, head up, a quickness to it that wasn't servility, like she was choosing to move fast, not being chased. That's a small thing to say about a woman, but on that ranch it wasn't small. I watched a lot of people move on that land, and most of them had been bent by it. She hadn't. We spoke for the first time in March, when I was leading a horse with a thrown shoe past the kitchen garden, and she was on her knees in the dirt pulling early weeds. She said something to the horse, not to me, to the horse in Spanish, something about his color. He was a claybank with a white mane, and she said he looked like he'd been rolled in flour, which was about right. I laughed. She looked at me like she hadn't expected that. Then she looked back at the horse. "You working the north pasture?" she said. "All week." She nodded, then, "There's a section near the second windmill where the wire's down in the grass, has been since November. You'll want to watch the horses." She knew the land better than I did, better than most of the riders did. She'd grown up on it. I said I'd watch for it and thanked her, and that was the whole conversation. But I thought about it afterward. The way she'd offered the information plainly, as one working person to another. No performance, just useful knowledge given. I started to notice her the way you notice the weather when you spend all day in it, not obsessively, just as a fact of the landscape. She was there, she was competent, she was careful, and she moved through a world that was quietly, constantly threatening her, and she moved through it with her back straight, and I thought, that takes something. I didn't know the word for what it takes, still don't entirely. The thing with Constance Aldridge happened on a Thursday in April. I wasn't there for the beginning of it. What I know I pieced together from what I saw and what other people said, and what Lupe eventually told me herself, though that was much later and in pieces, the way bad memories come out, not all at once, but a part here and a part there, like pulling splinters. What happened was this. Constance had a particular brooch, silver, with a blue stone that her mother had given her. She wore it for church-going and for guests and for when Harlan brought her into Rosario for the holidays. It went missing. Now, things went missing on that ranch with some regularity because Harlan Aldridge ran a loose account and had a drinking habit and a temper that made men help themselves when they could, but Constance had decided that Lupe had taken it. She hadn't. I know this because the brooch turned up the following month in a coat pocket of Harlan's that he'd sent to Rosario to be cleaned. He'd apparently picked it up off the dresser and pocketed it absent-mindedly and never mentioned it. But that was May. This was April. In April, Constance told Harlan that Lupe had stolen from her. Harlan had a man for discipline. That's what he called him, his man for discipline. A squat, quiet fellow named Briggs who'd come up from somewhere south and had the particular stillness of men who enjoy their work. I'd steered clear of Briggs from the first week. There are men you read in the first 5 minutes, and he was one of them. Briggs took Lupe to the side of the stable. I was in the stable when it happened. In a stall at the far end, working liniment into a mare's foreleg. I heard it before I understood what I was hearing, a sound that doesn't translate well into language, the kind of sound that goes straight past your ears into somewhere lower. I came to the stall door. Through the gap in the boards, I could see the side yard. I won't describe it at length. What I'll say is this: I stood there for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and then I walked out. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. I hadn't thought. I had my belt knife in my hands and nothing like a plan. Briggs was big across the back and mean, and he had a long leather strap, and he'd done this before. I could tell from how he held himself, relaxed, practiced, not angry, which was the worst part of it. Not angry at all. I said, "That's enough." He turned. He looked at me the way a man looks at an insect that has landed somewhere inconvenient, not threatened, just mildly annoyed. "You got business here, cowboy." I said, "That's enough." Lupe was on her knees in the dirt. She hadn't made a sound since I'd come out. That straight back was bent now, just at the shoulders, and her arms were crossed in front of her and her head was down. She wasn't looking at me. I don't think she knew what was happening. Briggs took a step toward me. He was going to explain something, I could see it, going to explain in the way that large men who do terrible things explain to smaller men the shape of the world as they understand it. And I thought, I am 42 years old. I have $40 to my name and a horse and a bedroll and a knife. I have nothing to lose that amounts to anything. And I thought, if I walk away from this, I am something I don't want to be. I don't know if I hit him first or he hit me first. It went fast and it went hard, and it ended with me on one knee in the dirt with a split lip and Briggs sitting against the stable wall looking surprised, and then not looking like anything in particular, because he was unconscious. My right hand was badly bruised and I didn't know it yet. I knelt down next to Lupe. She looked up at me. Her face was very still. Not the stillness of shock, or not only that, but something older and more practiced. The kind of stillness that comes from having learned a long time ago not to show certain things in certain company. "Can you stand?" A pause, then, "Yes." She stood. It cost her something to do it. I could see it cost her. I didn't ask permission. I didn't think about it. I took my knife and I cut 2 strips from the hem of my riding coat, good leather, cost me 2 months' wages in El Paso, and I didn't think about that at all, and I folded them and I pressed them gently to the worst of it across her shoulders, and I said, "I need to clean this properly. You'll follow me to the bunkhouse." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "They'll fire you." "Probably. They may do worse." "Probably that too." She kept looking at me. There was something in her face I couldn't read yet. I'd learned to read it later, but at that point I didn't know her well enough. Then she said, "All right." I did get fired. Not right away. Harlan Aldridge was in Rosario that day and didn't come back until the following morning. But when he came back, he came with Briggs, who had a broken nose and a grievance, and the conversation was short. I was given until noon to clear my gear. What I didn't expect was that Lupe was there when I came out with my saddlebag. She was standing near the gate. She'd packed a single bundle, everything she owned apparently in a cloth tied at 4 corners, and she was wearing her good dress, which was faded blue cotton and not particularly good anymore, and she had her head up and her back straight, and she looked at me like she was daring me to say something about it. I didn't say anything about it. I said, "You got somewhere to go." "No. You got people in Rosario." "An aunt, maybe." I thought about this. I had my horse, my $40, a bedroll, and now a badly bruised right hand that made gripping a rein painful. I thought about what a man with those resources could reasonably offer another person. I thought about what was right and what was practical and whether they were the same thing. "I'll take you to Rosario," I said. "After that's up to you." She looked at me for another moment. Then she bent and picked up her bundle and walked to where I'd tied the horse and waited. It was 30 miles to Rosario. We walked most of it because the horse couldn't carry 2 at a pace, and Lupe walked without complaint and without excessive talk, which suited me. I'm not a man who fills silence with words. Never have been. My first wife, Clara, used to say I could go 3 days without speaking and be perfectly content, and she wasn't wrong, and it didn't bother her, which was one of the things I loved about her. Clara had been gone 7 years by then. There hadn't been anyone since. Somewhere around the 15-mile mark, we stopped at a creek to water the horse, and I unwrapped Lupe's shoulders. I'd done a proper job at the bunkhouse with the clean shirt, the water from my canteen, a needle and thread I carried out of old habit, and checked the cloth and replaced what needed replacing. She sat on a rock and looked at the water while I worked, and didn't flinch and didn't speak. I said, "The one on the left will leave a mark." "I know. I'm sorry." She turned and looked at me, just briefly, then back at the water. "It isn't yours to be sorry for," she said. "No, but I'm sorry anyway." A pause, then, "The shirt you used, it was yours." "Old one?" "It wasn't old," she'd looked at it. Noticed the quality of the weave, the fact that it hadn't been worn to threads like my others. "You were saving it." I didn't answer that. I tied off the bandage. "Why?" she said, not accusing. Just asking, plain and direct, the way she'd told me about the downed wire in the north pasture, like she wanted useful information, not a performance. I thought about how to answer that for a moment. "Because it was wrong," I said, "and I was there, that's the whole of it." She was quiet. I went back to the horse. We walked another mile before she spoke again. "The brooch," she said, "I didn't take it." "I know." "You couldn't know, you weren't there." "I know you," I said, and that was strange to say. We'd spoken maybe 5 times. But I meant it, and she heard that I meant it, and she didn't argue. The aunt in Rosario was real. A small, dark woman named Celia who lived in 2 rooms behind a laundry and who came to the door with the wariness of someone who had learned that visitors brought trouble. She looked at Lupe. She looked at me. She looked at the bundle. Her face went through several things rapidly and settled on a kind of braced resignation. "What happened?" she said, not a question. "The Aldridges," Lupe said. Celia looked at me again. "He helped," Lupe said. The look Celia gave me was not warm exactly, but it wasn't unfriendly. She stepped back from the door, that was enough. I left Lupe there. I had $22 left after buying provisions on the road, and I left her 15 of them, which she argued about, and I didn't engage with the argument, just set the money on the table and went back to the door. She followed me out to the street. "Where will you go?" she said. "North, maybe. I hear there's work up near the Sandia Range." She stood there in the dust, her bundle at her feet, the faded blue dress. The late sun was in the west, and it lit up the dust around her feet in that particular way the low desert sun does, gold and thick like something solid. She was looking at me with that expression I'd been slowly learning to read, the one that was careful and still but wasn't cold, wasn't closed, just watchful, like she was deciding something. "You didn't have to do what you did," she said. "No. Briggs will look for trouble. He'll look in the wrong direction. He's not smart." The corner of her mouth moved, just barely. "No," she agreed, "he's not." Another pause. "The shirt," she said, "I'll make you a new one." I looked at her. "I sew well," she said, "better than the one you cut up." "That's not necessary." "I know it isn't." She picked up her bundle. "Come back through Rosario when you come south again." She went inside. I stood there in the street for a moment. Then I went to find somewhere to sleep. I went north. I found work. I spent 8 months up near the Sandia Range doing what I knew how to do: horses, cattle, fence, whatever a spread needs from a man who knows the land. I thought about Lupe Vargas more than I had any particular reason to. Not in a consuming way, more the way you think about something you left unfinished. A question that hadn't been answered. A thing I'd done that had mattered to someone, and I found I wanted to know how it had turned out. In the spring of the following year, I came south again. I want to be honest about this part. I told myself I was coming through Rosario because it was on the way. It is, more or less, on the way. That was not why I was coming through Rosario. Celia's laundry was still there. Celia herself met me at the door again, with the same wariness, and then the same braced resignation, and then she called back over her shoulder in Spanish and went inside without another word. Lupe came to the door. She looked different, not changed, the same woman, same straight back, same way of looking at you direct, but different in some way I couldn't name immediately. Then I named it. She looked settled. Not happy necessarily or not yet, but settled the way a plant looks when it's finally in the right soil. Rooted. She looked at me for a moment, then she stepped back from the door. "Come in," she said. "I made something." It was a shirt. Good linen, good work, careful stitching, the kind of care in it that you could feel when you picked it up, weight and evenness and attention. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her while I held it, and she watched me look at it, and she didn't say anything, and I understood that she was watching to see if I understood what it was she was giving me. I understood. "It's too good," I said, "for a working shirt." "It's not a working shirt," she said. I looked at her. "It's a shirt for Sundays," she said. "For when you come to town," a pause, "if you come to town." I looked at the shirt in my hands. Soft linen, cream white, the stitching along the collar so fine it was almost invisible. She'd spent weeks on this. Maybe months. She'd thought about me for months, the way I'd been thinking about her. The knowledge of that sat heavy and warm in my chest like a coal. "I was planning on it," I said. "Coming to town." "Good," she said, and went to put the kettle on. We were married that October in Celia's backyard by a priest from the church down the street. Celia cooked for 2 days. 3 of the women from the neighborhood came. 1 man from the laundry who had apparently decided I was acceptable after Celia said so, which meant more than any approval I can think of. I wore the shirt. Lupe wore a white dress she'd made herself. She was a better seamstress than I'd known. She was good at most things she turned her hand to, which I was still learning, and she looked at me during the ceremony with that expression I'd spent 2 years learning to read. I could read it fully now. It meant, "I chose this. I see you. I see exactly what you are, and I chose it freely." That's not a small thing for a man to be given. I need to tell you about Harlan Aldridge, because he comes in here. He came to Rosario in the November after we were married. Not because of us, we'd been careful, we were small people, we had nothing he wanted, and we'd gone quiet. He came for other business, and he saw me on the street by accident, and whatever he felt about what I'd done to Briggs and walked away from his ranch, he felt it loudly and publicly. He said things in the main street of Rosario that I won't repeat. They concerned Lupe mostly, who she was, what she'd been, what it said about me that I'd married her. He was a big man, Harlan Aldridge, big in the way that money makes men big, that particular swollen confidence of a man who's never been contradicted on his own land. He had 2 riders with him. I was alone. Lupe was home. She didn't know any of this was happening yet. I stood there and I let Aldridge finish talking, which took longer than it should have because he was a man who liked the sound of his own voice. And then I said, quietly enough that the people nearby had to lean in a little, "You'll want to stop there." He didn't stop. I said, "The next thing you say about my wife will cost you." He laughed, he looked at his riders. "Here is what I know about myself that I've known since I was young, and that has got me into trouble and also out of it. I'm not a large man. Never have been. I am a man who knows how to make a few seconds go entirely in one direction, and I have done it enough times that I am not afraid of it, and that not being afraid is visible, apparently, because Aldridge looked at me again, closer this time, and whatever he saw in my face made him stop laughing. He didn't say anything else. He left. His riders followed. The town had heard. That's how it is in a small town. The walls hear, the street hears. The woman at the store hears and tells the man at the feed store. By evening, most of Rosario knew that the Aldridge rancher had come in running his mouth, and the man who'd married Lupe, Vargas, had stopped him in the main street with 12 words. The next morning, one of the men from the neighborhood came by and asked if I had interest in a piece of land north of town that a man named Fuentes was selling at a loss. He'd ask around, he said, see what could be done. That was how it started. That was how we got the land. We ran it for 23 years. Cattle first, then horses. I knew horses better, and Lupe had a hand with them that still surprised me years in. She'd grown up around working animals, and she had a patience with them and a way of being near them that was almost like conversation. Our 2 sons grew up on that land. The eldest, Vicent, is on the land still. I think about the shirt sometimes, the white linen one. I wore it for Sundays and for town and for the christenings and the one funeral I had to go to in good clothes, which was Celia's, and I wore it when Vicent was married, and I was careful with it. It lasted 20 years before it finally gave out past saving, and I kept it anyway, folded in the chest at the foot of the bed, and Lupe never asked me why because she knew why. It was proof. Not of her love for me, I had plenty of other proof of that. 23 years of it. Mornings and evenings and hard seasons and good ones, and the way she'd touch my arm when I came in tired and hadn't spoken yet. The way she knew to leave silence alone and fill it when it needed filling. That shirt wasn't proof of her love. It was proof of what she'd seen when she decided to make it. She'd seen a man who'd done the right thing when it cost him. A man who'd walked out of a stable door knowing what it was going to cost him and done it anyway. She'd seen that, and she'd decided, in whatever time she'd spent alone in 2 rooms behind a laundry in Rosario, that it meant something. That he meant something. That a man like that was worth a Sunday shirt, worth crossing a room toward, worth the particular thing she gave me when she looked at me across Celia's backyard in her white dress. That expression, fully readable by then, that said, "I see exactly what you are." I was a working man with $40 and a horse and a belt knife. I was no one's hero, and I knew it. But she saw me, and she stayed, and you can't ask more than that. She's been gone 3 years now. The land is Vicent's. I live in the house, and I'm useful enough, though I'm slower than I was, and I know it, and I mind it, and Vicent is careful not to say so, which is its own kind of goodness. I found the shirt last spring in the chest, still folded. The linen's gone yellow, but you can still see the stitching along the collar, that fine, almost invisible line she put in, patient stitch by patient stitch, thinking about a man she'd decided was worth thinking about. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while with it. Then I put it back. There are things you don't let go of. Not because you're living in the past, I'm right here, this old man in this house on land that's still standing, but because some things are the whole proof of your life. The proof that you were seen. That you were known. That once, when it mattered, you did the right thing and it came back to you in the form of a woman who chose you with her eyes open, knowing exactly what she was choosing. That's all a man can really hope for. I think that's enough.